Okay. All right. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome everyone to this month's learning event hosted by the ICF Bengaluru chapter. And this is hosted by our team and group coaching community of practice. My name is Rachel Goja, and I am the vice president for the chapter as well as the lead for the team and group coaching community of practice. Now, before I introduce our guest for today, I would like to just get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way. So firstly, the session offers you one core competency unit that you can use towards your coach credentialing or to renew your credential with ICF. But to get this CCUU, you will need to attend the complete session, which we will track via your Zoom login, which also means that please ensure that your Zoom display name is exactly as you would like it to appear on your CCU certificate. So that's important. So make sure that you logged in the, your name appears correctly there, right? Okay, so with that out of the way, I would like to welcome Craig McKenzie, our guest speaker for today. Now, Craig is the head of team coaching and academy for Transcend International. In his role, he has also been working very closely with Professor David Clutterbuck, that we all know is one of the pioneers in the field of team coaching. And Craig has been, over the years, working with Professor Clutterbuck to develop team coaching curriculum, research, and practice for almost 10 years now. Craig is also currently head of program and core faculty for the CCMI Senior Practitioner Program. He holds certifications from both ICF and EMCC as a coach, as a team coach, and as a coach supervisor. He is ICF Hong Kong's past president, EMCC Asia Pacific founding member, and former head of GTCI Pedal Stream and core faculty member. And he has been working with leadership teams directly, globally, since 2003. Now, Craig is also someone that I have personally learned a lot from in my own team coaching journey. So I would like to welcome you very warmly, Craig, to the session today, and over to you.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much, Rachel, and lovely to see some. It's funny, I recognize some names, but I don't know if I actually recognize those names or I just remember those names. So, or it's a familiar name in some way. Let me just adjust that so I don't see only Rachel, though it's not a horrible thing to see only Rachel. But welcome everybody. I am delighted to be with you. And we're just on the cusp of lots of things. So I'm going to share with you this interesting topic of simplexification, what we call the team coach's superpower, which is, of course, a wonderfully catchy title, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have any superpowers at all, but it might mean that you feel like what we've found is that if coaches can get a handle on this, then it can be very much a elevation of their practice and their skill and their ability to work skillfully with teams. So yeah, that's all sort of like technical stuff about me. I'm a human also, and I have a second family with a wonderful wife, and working from home lets me be with my 4-year-old and also be with my wife and travel and enjoy things. Our company Transcend has been active in Hong Kong and China and Asia, and we have offices in London now as well since about 2006. And I play a big role in that as well. And team coaching is kind of the space that I specialize in. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about simplexification. But before that, so David, myself, Tony Dickel, our chairman and CEO from Transcend, and a lady named Lise Lewis, that some of you might know, which is former EMCC president, developed something called the Global Institute for Team Coaching Supervision. And in the process of that, we did a lot of work around developing curriculum to train supervisors to be team coaching supervisors. And we ran a pilot with the leaders of the profession globally, who were quite a difficult and wonderful audience in terms of their challenging us. And one of the things that we came up with, David and I, when we were talking about what are some of the big differences, is we developed this word we called complexification. And initially what we thought was this was an original word, like we had invented something. But of course, further research revealed that no, we hadn't really, that it existed in other places. And as we worked with team coaches, we were talking about their ability to not shy away from complexity. And then what we found in the journey was that actually team coaches and team coaching supervisors that loved complexity or got interested in systems and complex adaptive systems and all that actually made things more complex than they needed to be. So because we loved it, we brought the team into it, and we were all like, "Oh, look at this," and all that, and we loved that. But then on further reflection, as we developed our framework, and you can go to Global Institute for Team Coach Gifts with a TCS to see it. It's there if you want, but don't do it now because then you'd be distracted. We realized that actually the thing that needs to change is not the coach's ability to apprehend, understand, and deal with complexity, but actually something else, which we called simplexification. And again, David and I thought we'd invented a word, but we hadn't. But that's okay. It's still fun. But we also have some meaning applied to it. So let me share that with you a little bit. I'll share a couple of slides, and then I'll create some conversation around it. There we go. I'm on a different screen, so if you see me looking over, I have two screens active, and I don't have the skill to somehow make them work together. But what we mean by this is that we say simplification is the art of making complex things as simple as possible without simplification. Or in some cases, we say resorting to simplification. So my first question, I'm going to get you to share your thought. Does that connect? Does it mean anything to you? Is it an absurdity? What's the difference between simplification and simplexification, do you think? So let's hear your thoughts on that. Just unmute yourself in chat if that's what you do in this world. Otherwise, put something in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with.
Craig, is it fair to say that don't simplify far too much? And I think you come somewhere in the in middle. You know what I mean? You wanted to make complex things into very simplified. We understand, we get it, but sometimes we oversimplify it, which loses its essence or meaning behind it. So yet you get the context, right? What I'm trying to make sense here, but that's what is coming in my mind.
Thanks, Raghu. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I have this Einstein quote, right? Make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. Yeah. So, right. So we're taking complex things and we're not going into the dimension of simplification, which we're oversimplifying. The difference is that we're not afraid of the complexity. That's probably the biggest thing for us as team coaches, is we're not afraid of the complexity, but we're also not in love with the complexity. Right. So and that's why it's an art, because it's this idea of I'm not going to simplify or oversimplify, which is once things are simple, they can be oversimplified. But as a team coach, when you work with teams, of course, there's lots of complexity. All right. So this is that. And this is why it's in a way a superpower, because the idea is that this is an ability that you develop as a coach, right? Where you are capable of seeing the complexity, and people struggle with it, including yourself, but not resort to oversimplification or simplification. But it still can be simple. That's that range. So let me look at the chat. There's some great things there, and feel free to comment a bit. Yeah, it's not super simple. It's as simple as possible. So it might not be super simple. That it might be possible to take something complex and make it super simple. Like, for example, a team that discovers that the key stakeholder is their customer, and the team realizes that actually we need to make sure that our customer is safe and satisfied. That might be as simple as possible. Lots of complexity, but actually who we serve is not a myriad of stakeholders. The most important stakeholder in our system is the customer. So that might be simple, but again, it's still complex. Asha, you love a copy of the presentation? Of course, you can have that. I'll send it. Making simple things complex is simplification. That's interesting. No, it would be sort of the reverse of it. Well, yeah, it's interesting, Suresh. Making simple things complex. No, it's not making things more complex than they are. It's help making things that are complex as simple as possible. Yeah. Interesting, C.N. Murphy. You would simplify complicated things, but yeah, so I guess it's hard because you're actually, how do you say this? You're not making anything more complex than it already is. So this is like, you're embracing the complexity, you're allowing it to be, and you're inviting your team, because they live in complexity, to handle it at the level that they can handle it. You may zoom out, yeah, that's a big part of it, and you know, it gets crazy. And now you're just simply saying, so what do we need to focus on? What does the team need to work on? So they recognize they're in this midst of this craziness. But then now, how do we help the team live with that, deal with that, and work with that? And yeah, Preeti, you're trying to visualize it. Very hard to visualize. But let me try to just take it a step further. I'll take it a step further. I'll wrap your head around it a bit more, and then we'll see what happens. All right. So let me share again, and I'll give you a sense of it. So we would say this is a capability that coaches need to develop, team coaches need to develop, and coaches as well. So the first thing you need to understand about the way we think about things is that we would say teams are complex adaptive systems. Now, Peter Kins has his system team, so that's saying we work with the team and its systems to help the team to develop that systems. What we've done in GTCI and our Clutterbuck and our Transcend programs is we actually say that that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But a complex adaptive system is what we say teams are actually this. So complex adaptive systemic approach is not an approach. It is simply treating the team as a complex adaptive system. So that we're not saying that the team is anything linear. So we differentiate linear, systemic, and complex adaptive. So it's not something that's linear. The team is a complex adaptive system. It is a system. There are relationships within that system. There are processes. There's reporting. There's responsibility. There's history. There's narratives. There's a bunch of individuals trying to align themselves. That team itself is a complex adaptive system. And then it sits within an organization which is made up of other teams, which are complex adaptive systems. And that organization itself is a complex adaptive system that is nested within other complex adaptive systems. So we'd say this is Russian dolls is what we would say. The team is a CAS in a CAS in a CAS in a CAS in a CAS. And it goes quite large, you know, if we go further. To economic systems, political systems, weather systems, whatever it happens to be, that are those larger systems that we all interact with it. So a critical thing to understand in our approach, or the approach of the complex adaptive systemic approach, is that teams are complex adaptive systems. I was doing a presentation to the senior practitioner program, and one of the participants, who's maybe a bit more linear than others, she was sort of saying, like, so how did you decide to use this approach? And then what I replied to her was, we're not deciding to use any approach. We simply, the team is a complex adaptive system. Treating it otherwise is not useful. Right? That's kind of what we're saying. So let me go a little bit further with this, and we'll see what happens. So what we say is teams are complex adaptive systems. And if you do any work with complex adaptive systems, you'll find out that if you try to research it, you'll find that there are anywhere from 3 to 20 or more characteristics. So the 3 basic characteristics of a complex adaptive system is that there's heterogeneous agents making decisions in an evolving way. So you already have a bit of complexity even in that. They interact with each other, and this leads to emergence, which can be processes, relationships, conflicts, whatever it happens to be. And that they cannot be understood by focusing on the parts alone. And this is really key for team coaches. Right? So often, if we take a linear approach, we focus on a problem, for example, we're going to solve that problem, or we focus on a person, the team leader, or a team member, or a stakeholder. But we can't understand by only looking at one part, because the interactions between the parts is where a lot of the emergence happens, and that's where the evolution happens. Okay, so this is all, building up, and here's some of the more characteristics. And this is where it kind of gets, it can be more complex, but a little bit simple as well. Because the first thing about complex adaptive systems is they operate by simple rules. So when we talk about simplexification, simple as possible is what is the rules. So if the rule is, let's keep our customer safe and satisfied, then every decision we make is now related to that. We can be faster, we can handle complexity if we boil it down to that. In the natural world, an example of a complex adaptive system would be a school of fish. And when you study schools of fish, what you find that they actually are governed by quite simple rules. Move with the fish on either side of you. If they move, you move. Basically, stay together, and if they move left, you move left. Flocks of birds, very similar, right? So this is that idea of simple rules are there within that practice. So this is what teams are. So we would say teams are complex adaptive systems, full stop. A team coach who is capable of working with that reality needs to develop their ability to their skill, their art of simplexification. So the goal is not to simplify, the goal is to hold the complexity, help the team to understand as much of it or as little of it as they need to, in order for them to figure out what they need to do and how they need to develop. Okay, so let me just stop there and just say, what's going on in your mind as you think about that. And I will give an example. It's very theoretical, right, isn't it? Well,
one of the things that's coming up for me as I'm listening to this is it's kind of coming down to so you have all of this complexity that exists in the system, and yet if you can get it, get the focus of the team boiled down to those key points, and we may use the term simple rules for those, or simple focus points, and that just makes it very clear that maybe there are multiple things that are happening around you, but this is what governs your path and your decisions and your journey. Yeah, is that's how it's.
It can be like I'll share an example that sort of fits that maybe. is a team that we worked with was having feeling a whole bunch of pressure, a bunch of pain from the external system, is what they said. Pressure internal, pressure external, all this stuff was happening, and they were quite distressed as a team. And they were sort of, that caused something to happen, and this caused something to happen. So again, you have complexity. And what we did was we actually helped the team to map its pressure. We did a stakeholder map. We talked about the different relationships that are out. Then we looked at where does the pressure actually come from, and where does the pressure come from that has this impact on your team, and how is that creating pressure in other parts of the system. We just looked at this idea of pressure. You can do it with pain or power or whatever you do. And what the team realized, so we mapped it all out on the wall, and we had like those symbols they drew for pressure was like a cloud, a dark cloud. And then they stood back, and I had them all just kind of go, well, what do you notice? And what they said was really, really powerful. They said, it all originates with one place. Like we feel pressure all these other places, but actually that particular space was where they had problems. In this case, it was actually external regulators. It was external regulators that they never went to the meetings of. They never influenced them in any way. They never understood what was coming. So the team was under this incredible pressure because they were experiencing this external change. But what they realized, said, so what are you learning? And they just said, we need to go to those meetings. Like literally, the pain we're experiencing is because we're not doing this thing that helps us. And we need to come not only to those meetings, but we need to come with our agenda. We need to begin to influence. We need to create value there, build the relationship network that we need to do. And it was like not really a big deal.
Yeah.
You know? So then we explored, so how's that going to work? How's that going to impact other areas? We began to look at how that might interact through the system to create meaning and value for that action. And the team realized if they could manage that more skillfully, that they would have a very different experience. And of course, that's one session, right? There's lots more stuff that happened after and before that. Does that give you some perspective on how it was said?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have a
Raghu?
question.
Sure.
This is
Lakshmi?
Lakshmi.
Hi, Lakshmi.
Yeah, so is it hi. So is it understanding while there are complex layers in the team, like, and the organization and culture and all that, is it understanding the dynamics between them to make it more meaningful and to...
Well, and again, I would say you're trying to make it a bit too simple.
Okay.
That's one factor.
Okay.
And it's a great factor, the dynamics, the interrelationships, the links, and then there's more. Right?
Yeah.
So, and this is where, you might develop as in this area, it's a beautiful place to develop, right? It's because, I want to boil it down to one thing. You won't boil it down to one thing. You need to boil it down to your ability to go, I don't know what it is. It could be that, could be that, could be that. But I'm going to hold all those things. I'm noticing these things. And now, and I'll react to the chat that just came through, is that it's not so much our ability to bring clarity, but it's to help the team get clarity.
Clarity, okay.
Right? So as a team coach, we might see it, we think we see it, but again, we're not in the system. We're part of the team as a system, as a team coach, but we're not living in that reality. So we could say, oh, I think it's that, and then they'll tell you, oh, it's this, but then this, and then that, and then that, and you're going to get into a lot of, hassles. But if you just say, what is that a connection? If you notice that it's something that you think is real, you just say, well, what about this? But you notice in my example, I didn't tell them where to act. I saw that, but I didn't say this is it. I noticed it early.
Yeah.
But again, I'm doing something what we would call helping the team develop systemic awareness and helping them develop the ability to see themselves as a complex adaptive system.
Yeah, got it.
Greg, Nikhil here.
Yeah, Nikhil, sure.
So, in my experience, individuals have differing abilities in being able to comprehend a complex adaptive system, and also basis where their experiences lie. The meaning they'll make of it can also look very starkly different. And here, as a coach, we have to um, help the team come together to arrive at a view that they can all then move forward from. Um, how how would the coach go about doing that without really getting to say, okay, here's my view also, or uh, tending to get hooked onto some people's view who are seeing it similar to how the coach is perceiving it, and the others still struggling to even start to see that picture. I mean, it could take quite a while for that to happen also.
Yeah, or seconds. That's the wonder of team coaching. But you mentioned something else, right? So meaning making is a system.
Yeah.
So how do individuals make meaning is a system, and how does the team make meaning? How do sub teams on the team make meaning? So again, we're looking to, like, so where you're headed is this space where we're going, like, how do we help the team appreciate their complexity and find ways to move forward together? So agreement, not that, and this is the whole thing. We don't need to teach a team that it's complex. So when we first started to work with complexity theory in teams, team coaches were just making teams overwhelmed with their complexity. They go, oh, let's map out how complex your life is. And teams were like, the coach was really excited, but the team was traumatized or overwhelmed. And that's where this shift comes into the space where we say simplification, the art of making things as simple as possible without resorting to simplification. So it's a beginning. Yeah. How does the team coach do that? The team coach contracts, creates agreements with the team on where they might be worth exploring in order to create the type of awareness that will enable them in their system to identify where they need to make changes, where they need to develop, where they need to focus their attention in order to achieve their outcomes.
Great.
God, I'm glad that's recorded because that was very nice. I think.
Thank you.
Greg, this is
Because
Raghu.
this is it, right? And it's a great statement. And that was wait, let me look at the chat here. That was C.N. Murphy. I don't know, but how would one guard against simplifying to a sense that the essence of the complex system is not lost? That's the challenge. That's the art. And the reality is that the teams that, in the world that we live in right now, teams and organizations and leaders are trying to solve complex problems, wicked problems, either, if you're aware of Sinafin, chaotic problems with linear solutions, right? So the whole idea is wicked problems, like pollution of the oceans, for example, is there's no linear solution to that. There's no systemic solution to that. It's a complex adaptive problem, and it's a complex adaptive system, the oceans, the garbage collection, people's habits, overuse of plastic, convenience, addiction to things, whatever it is, laziness, all this stuff contributes to that problem. So how do we solve it, right? There isn't just one factor. So it means that there's a multiplicity of ways. We could need to get people to cooperate in different ways. So this is the challenge. So let me ask you this question, just to get your thinking different. So we would say very strongly, and this is, again, a large section of the global community in team coaching, is team coaching is way more complex than individual coaching. So please tell me or us together, what are some areas that you would say, yeah, I agree with that statement because I think this is more complex, or this is what I experienced. We've done some research into this. I'll share that research in a second. and published some articles on it. But I'd love to hear just your thoughts. What have you noticed as a practitioner? Where's the complexity that you see? Complex relationships. Welcome to say more if you want, but that's great. Complex relationships, you bet.
Previously held power dynamics between the players that tends to create the behaviors in the moment when they're trying to work through problems.
Exactly. Yeah, wonderful. And not only this, which is really interesting, is that it's not just the people that are in the room, but it's the previous team leader. And your previous team leaders from the previous companies that you worked on. We call these the ghosts of other things that are in the room, right? So yeah, there's all that.
Yeah.
What else do we have? Lovely. We have complex relationships, multiple complex factors, power games. Yeah, we would sometimes, when we map systems, we would map power. Where is the power in this system? And what direction does the power go? Perspectives, multiplicity of perspectives, beautiful. Agreement on goals, beautiful. Generating trust. Contracting on the problem, being addressed in different ways. Yeah. Different individual goals from team, different values, complex thinking, different backgrounds, beautiful. You know, one of the factors of a team is of a complex adaptive system is doesn't have the requisite variety. And actually what we mean by that is that it turns out that in order for a complex adaptive system to be effective, it needs to have a certain amount of diversity within the system in order for it to actually be effective. So that's it's just, does this team have enough diversity in order to be effective? Or is it just not making use of its diversity in the way that can create the most value? So is diversity a problem versus an opportunity? The most innovative teams, according to research, are the teams that are, it turns out, that have high diversity and high norms. So again, how does the team coach work with a team that has high diversity, maybe has even high conflict? It might be that they just need to develop team norms. And once the team norms are developed, simple rule, then the team becomes more innovative. And solving conflict linear might not be the best solution. Right? And we could look at systemically, where's conflicts in the system, where does it come from? That's all fine. But actually, if we look at it from a complex adaptive systems approach, we go, it's like, what do you want instead of what you have? How can we help you develop that? And you need to innovate, and you have a bunch of conflict. You have diversity, which is a key requirement of innovation, but you have conflict. So what are your norms? Your norms around conflict, your norms around innovation, your norms around process. How do we do that? And if it's an innovative accounting team, they're going to look very different than if it's an innovative design team. There's no one size fits all, right? So I'll share this with you. So here's where we have tracked complexity in team coaching, and in our work in training team coaching supervisors, we found actually quite a lot of resistance to some of these. So the types of teams, their systems, the work with them, the context, the cases themselves. A leadership team is not a leadership team in a different organization. It's very different. Even the name leadership team doesn't mean the same thing from organization to organization, or even within the same organization. The coach themselves is a form of complexity, their own formation journey, their own maturity, what they're capable of. One of the beautiful areas where this really comes out is when we have team coaches working in pairs, and they need to also manage that relationship. And when the coaches are at different levels of formation and maturity, or even differing abilities to work with complexity, different abilities to work systemically. So a coach who's linear working with a coach who's systemic even is going to have some problems and challenges because they're going to see the task differently. And then add in a coach who's even more mature or more capable in different areas. And again, it might come in. The complexity in team coaching includes the processes, and this is related to the roles that a team coach might play over the course of an engagement. One of the realities of team coaching is that very often the team coaching emerges out of some other relationship. So we coach the team leader, and then we get invited to coach the team. Or we do some training, and then we get invited to coach the team. Or some other relationship. Or the team actually, and in our team coaching processes, the team coach could actually be a consultant for certain phases of that relationship, which leads us to contracting, which means the team coach needs to be quite skillful in moving through and navigating the complexity of the different roles they might play. The team coach needs to be able to handle that, adjust between those roles. I was working with a coach recently who, in the course of I'm an ICF assessor as well. She failed her PCC because she stepped out of the role of coach, but she didn't fail because she stepped out of her role as coach. She said, I want to step out of my role as coach and just offer you a piece of advice, if that's okay. Permission, that's fine. She offered the advice, fine. She never put the coach hat back on again. Right? So she stepped out of the role, contracted reasonably skillfully, might have failed anyways, but then she just, once she shifted roles, she couldn't shift back. But a team coach actually has to shift roles right on the fly. Like, would it be all right if I shared with you some ways of helping you understand the complexity in the room? Okay, I'm going to now teach something. I'm going to share something. I'm shifting into maybe trainer, facilitator, consultant mode, expert mode, whatever. But now I need to shift back and help them to make that shift, because they might treat me as an expert. Goals and outcomes, conversations, individual conversations. This is great when you think about complexity. Think about the conversations. So like you're with a team and you're having a conversation in that room. For, let's say you have a good engagement. You have one day every 3 months with that team. That one day is a microscopic amount of conversation compared to the conversations that each one of those team members is having with other team members, other parts of the organization, sub-teams within that team, stakeholders outside of the organizations, and the conversations they're having with themselves throughout that. Even while us together are in this room virtually for 1 hour, there are multiple conversations in this room. Just what's going on in your mind, the conversation that you had with yourself before you joined, or with somebody else. So all kinds of that. The client also is complex. Contracting is also complex. So you'll get the slide on that. Oh, that's great. Raghu, you have a question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. In fact, I was just thinking in my mind, how do I apply this simplification, right, in a real life context? Is it fair to say
Simplexification.
Simplification. What I was thinking was basically when you're in a team coaching, right, where you have stakeholder engagement, where you have to deal with the power dynamics, and especially the complexity comes from different perspectives. It could be too much of complexity, could be too much of noise, and the noise comes from the different perspectives where they think it's a complex, but yet it's not that complex when you look at when you look yourself back, right? When you step back, when you see a holistically 360-degree view, it's not complex, but people are making it complex. So what I was just thinking is, from a team coaching perspective as a coach, when you had to deal with these kind of challenges where human beings, right, the stakeholders themselves are making it complex, try to find one commonality, right? That commonality could be we know that could be one area that is causing all the problems, but yet you're not telling them, but yet you're kind of pointing, asking those powerful questions to guide them to that commonality, so they all come, right? Because everybody's coming from different perspectives. They think that this is the best solutions and pointing fingers out. I mean, I'm talking about real life examples. So is it fair to say we can apply that just find one commonality that is kind of the problem, and yet bring all the stakeholders to work together collaboratively. Not sure if I'm making sense here, Craig. Or
And it doesn't matter. And this is the beautiful thing about being comfortable with complexity. I mean, you're demonstrating that, right? As you're trying to describe it, the complexity is getting in the way, which is wonderful. It's beautiful, very human, lovely. I think the thing I would say is we're not trying to get them to come to anything common necessarily.
Okay, go ahead.
What we're working for is this sense of them being able to see themselves and what they need to do.
Okay.
And it could be that the coach, the team coach, and again, team coaching is very different than coaching. Team coach might need to say something like, you know, I look at this and I see it kind of simple. Would it be all right if I just shared what I see as simple? Or we might say, I just wonder if, can I just share what I see happening right now? You were moving toward this simple idea, and then everybody brought in a whole bunch of complexity. You know, am I wrong here? Is that what happened? And then I would even ask further question, is this what you always do as a team? Right? Is this a norm? We just about get somewhere, and then we've all contracted together to blow that. Right? So again, what's going on with that? Or is that actually important? And is there all this stuff? Like, that's the whole thing. So this is, so sometimes there's a link, there's a connection, there's something that's quite simple. There's a way of thinking, there's a mindset shift, there's empowerment shifts, there's relationship management. Sometimes there's something emerges as an issue. And sometimes they just need to get better at dealing with complexity. They need to develop their own ability in simplification. When they try to nail it down to one, they bump into complexity. So the norm is, let's try to nail it down to one, bump into complexity, do nothing. Or do what we've always done, right? So now we're saying, well, wait a minute. What if there's not a simple solution? What if you need to apply energy in multiple areas? Or what if it's just complex? Right? Marketing right now, very complex. Nothing simple about marketing in the world right now. Business development, there's some simplicity. Yeah, it's about relationships, all this stuff. Yeah, but there's a lot of complexity. You know, so it kind of depends. Like, I work with a lot of companies in mergers and acquisitions. So I work with teams that are either merging, or this team is taking over this organization, they've created a new team. And I often work with the integration. So the question I always ask the person who's in charge of integration is, I said, when is integration integrated? Like, how do you know it's integrated? And one company said, when our labels are on the boxes. I was kind of thinking, that might just be a bit too simple. And then we looked at, what are the problems that you're facing in this integration? They're not using our systems, they're not using our processes, they're competing in the wrong ways, they're interfering with customers, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what's your goal here in integration? Is your goal to get your label on the box? Because you're doing that. But all these other problems are happening, possibly because you're not considering that there might just be more to integration than brand integration. And they had a one-dimensional view of integration. And then I worked with the team to help. They had to influence the organization to understand that there were some dimensions of integration that if they paid attention to them, and they were multiple layered things, because it was about retention of employees, retention of customers, in integration of their processes that work, what about their knowledge, all that, like all kinds of stuff, technology, all kinds of stuff. But it was like, we just need to pay attention to it. We need to have a wider view, was the simple rule. Let's take a wider view. Simple rule. But the wider view meant they had to hold the complexity. Yeah, useful? Example?
Yep. That was good. Thank you.
All right, just looking at chats, impact of different outcomes on the team, defining harmony in the team, inherent problems. Yeah. We get into stuff like team narratives. What's the story the team tells itself about itself? That has a huge impact on a team. There's a team that we worked with once that they'd had a really good year about 5 years ago. And they were the team that rocked, except they hadn't rocked in 5 years. So they were still patting themselves on the back, but they were underperforming. No one ever touched their record year, of course. They were still the best team in history, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant in the present. So helping that team to shift their orientation from past success to present performance, but also the sort of the proverbial monkey on their back because they were so successful. Because other people saw them also that way, but actually the management's perception was like, we might have to fire these people because they're not delivering anymore. But they were kind of legends, which was in its own complexity. It was a big success. It was massive. But yeah, and again, if we study it again from a complexity theory perspective, probably not all down to their efforts, right? There's market conditions, and this competitor collapsed, and this new technology. Like, there's a whole bunch of factors. Like, yeah, they just happen to be in the and again, really great leaders will often say, I was lucky. The team was able to deliver. Yes, they were capable, but they were also in the right place at the right time, and they nailed it. So yeah, they nailed it for 1 year. But it's only 1 year. It's like, being a good husband for one night doesn't make me a good husband. So yeah, yeah, I don't want to blow your minds too much, but that idea of like, this is the reality. So let me make it, I'll try my own attempt to make it reasonably simple for you. And these are just 4 factors. And again, they're not 4 things you need to do. But here are some ways that we can shift our mind to work with more of a simplexification as a perspective. So this is really zooming out. So systemic awareness and developing our own capacity to be aware of systems and the complexity within the systems and their interactions. There are many ways that we can work with the team. There is no right way. There is no a way. There are many ways to work. So even when you say, let's find that commonality or let's find that key, actually, no, it's not that key or a key. It is just what can happen, what's possible, and be okay with that. And we really need to really avoid jumping into the expert pants or hat or whatever it is, but really see ourselves as constantly learners. And helping the teams to be aware of that as well. But we're really just seeing that we're constantly students of complexity. And it's not about getting it. It's too complex to get. But it's developing our capability and the capability of teams to not even embrace complexity, to not understand complexity, just to be with complexity and avoid the need to fix it, solve it, boil it down to its essence. So this is us, in a way, really zooming out, right? If you look at, someone wrote before, zoom out, right? So look at the systems and awareness, the interconnections between the systems. There's lots of ways to work. I don't have to find the way. There's no the way. I don't need to be an expert in this. I need to be a student of complexity. And I develop my own capability to sit with the discomfort that I feel when faced with complexity. The discomfort I feel when I can't solve it or I want to solve it, but also help the team to figure that out as well. So let me challenge you to reflect together now, and let's reflect in the group if you're okay with that. I was going to do breakout groups, only 9 minutes left, so let's just leave it. But let's discuss together. I just avoid asking a question or trying to understand it. Share where you think you need to upgrade your own and or a team's ability to work with systems and see itself as a complex adaptive system. So just think, like, how could you upgrade? Where do you need to upgrade your own ability to work with systems and complex adaptive systems? Because I'm in the learning business, not in the solving business. So what do you think? What's opening up for you? And there's no one way. There's just whatever's there for you is there for you. So what's coming up for you as you reflect on that question? Learning to be more comfortable with just sitting with complexity. Rajeshwari, thanks for that. Yeah, and lovely that you caught that language that I use, sitting with complexity, right? It's not in it, it's with it. It's just there. It's always there. So beautiful. Nice reflection.
I think for me, in my journey till now, it's been, so when I started coaching teams, I think I really struggled with this whole complexity thing. And I'm by nature a very organized person, so my natural instinct is to fix it. And then you realize you can't fix it because, you know, you fix one thing and it's so complex, it's going to be, complexity is just there and there's no solving it as such, right? And especially when it's in somebody else's system. Right? So I think my growth till now has been to get comfortable with the fact that there is complexity and it's always there. And I think to a large extent, maybe beyond real, I don't think it's possible to completely understand the complexity that the teams operate in. Right? So that thing has come in, and I think work in progress continues to be being okay with not knowing where is this conversation in, you know, in the coaching session going, because sometimes it just feels like there is no path and there is no direction, and being okay with there will be moments when there's no path and no direction.
Yeah, what's coming up for me, thanks, Rachel. What's coming up for me, Craig, is thank you for a wonderful, insightful, eye-opening session, is the fact that I'm just there in the midst of the complexity. I'm not even doing any coaching. I'm just being a coach. So it's a lot of difference between being a facilitator, being a trainer, and just being a coach. So I don't believe I coach the team. The team is coaching themselves in my presence.
Right, beautiful. And you guess what, Johnny? You're adding some complexity to the system. Right? That's, I mean, when a coach is in the room, it's the system is staged, right? So any input into the system changes the system, and it's great. And this is your thought. What's your role? And it's lovely, Joy. Like, you know, our goal is to help the team to coach itself, to become skillful, to become irrelevant and unnecessary at the level we were necessary before. Complexity, thinking with it, complexity is we're not done with that team just because the team is now more skillful. Our role has shifted their need. They have evolved like a complex adaptive system does. So they've evolved, and now we can help them in different ways if we're skillful enough. If we fixed a problem, which might needed to happen for the team, now that team is over that problem, they've evolved. Who are they now? If we're only fixers, we can't help them anymore, because we'll just create a new problem or look for a new problem or wait for one. But if we're able to adapt ourselves, now we can just be with the team. So what have you learned? Who are you now? Where are you going? Yeah, lovely. Someone else? Embrace complexity, stay curious. Thank you. Avoid the need to fix. Yes. Yes. And the team moves toward the same organizational goals. Yes. And it just might be that, is it a question of can they achieve that goal in the changed environment that they're working in? Is that goal suitable, or is there something else they could work on? deeper in my meaning attached to the word complexity, not wanting to be able to define it being one of the major takeaways. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. How are you feeling? Some of you are starting to go, but anybody, do you feel overwhelmed with complexity, or do you feel like you're in a good state of mind? I'm happy to take questions as you're here. Anybody want to share? Have a question? Have a learning? Nice to see you, Kathy.
Thanks. It's been really interesting, Craig. Sorry, I'm just a little bit dopey.
I think if there's one thing I could just let, some of you said it in different ways, but just to wrap up is this idea that complexity is not a problem to be solved, something to be fixed. It just is. It exists. Our body itself is a complex adaptive system. Your mind is a complex adaptive system. It just exists. So the challenge is just, if it's there, then again, how do we develop the art of making things simple as possible without resorting to simplification? Yeah. So maybe that now makes sense in a way at the end. So thanks, Rachel, for inviting me, and I'll let you do whatever you do at the end of these things.
I think Dave, you have a question. I saw you raise your hand. Craig, do we have time for? Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll
Thank
stay.
you.
Yeah, I can answer a question.
Oh, it was not a question. You answered the thought in the last comment which you made. The dilemma was, should I define complexity or should I not touch it at all? Because so that you gave the answer in your last statement. So thank you so much. My question got answered without asking it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's magic. It's its own complexity.
Yeah.
Or luck.
Okay, right. So I think that's been a very interesting, very thought-provoking, very insightful session. And I'm still thinking on a lot of things. And I think that you've done what every good coach does, leave people with a lot of thoughts and a lot of, ideas and yet, a lot of things to reflect on. So I think job well done. So thank you so much for making time to join us today, Craig, and thank you for sharing your wisdom, sharing your, this whole concept with us. I like I said, I'm still thinking about, how does this sit with me? And yeah, so I think that's been very, very interesting. So thank you so much. Appreciate you doing this for us. For everybody else, participants, thank you very much for joining us today and, participating and joining in the conversation. As always, the recording of this will go up on our YouTube channel, maybe in a couple of days. Those of you who've been here for the whole session, we'll get you your CCUs. Again, give it about 4 or 5 days, you should get that. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. Just text me or email me. Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining. And
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.